The piano shrieks. The streets are speechless. Ivory keys fly from its gaping mouth like shotgun shells, surprised yells of passerbys buried in the pulsating dissonance. This is how an instrument dies. Glancing up at the snap cables dangling in the crane's clutches, witnesses approach the musical corpse, singing discord as if its third pedal were still pressed down. And suddenly they see that the piano is bleeding, and that an arm outstretched, rigor mortis fingers unable to clench, is extending out of the wreckage to greet them. And this was the first time in 30 years that someone noticed Morgan Hawks. He wasn't always a pile of rags, the old man sitting, still as waxwork. The years had aged him into a gray face, deep bags beneath his cataract eyes. On his side lied a plastic case, hugging his remaining childhood artifacts. Wooden train tracks, pop-up books, wool socks, and lotto tickets his father once gave him. Morgan had come a long way from the Carolina beaches, and yet some grains of sand lingered like flashbacks in the pockets of his jeans. Perhaps they were all that remained of his prior life, of his daughter Lily, and her mother, his wife. But rarely did Morgan Hawks dwell on such things. It was just another day on the old BART train for him. When he reached his station, Montgomery Street, his bones creaked like a hardwood floor. He rose to meet his destination and thought his day would be like all days, cup held up in the hope of remaining human decency, waiting for that jingling change that could single-handedly change the contents of his dinner that evening. But this was not just a normal day, of course. For 3 stories up from the wall he leaned against lived Jackie Durson, a struggling artist. Her work had yet to graduate from the page, and so today she ticked in anticipation, waiting for the crane to bring in her good old grand piano, a Steinway, through her living room window. She watched the cables leisurely rise, then pause to let the wind die. And she remembered how her mother's fingers once lingered on the same set of 88 black and white keys. Then the wind did die, and again the piano began its climb. "Look, it's music in the air," a little girl tried to tell her mother, who only noticed that her daughter was attracting the glued eyes of a homeless man. "Filth," she muttered, grabbing her curious child's shoulder and hurrying their pace, leaving Morgan Hawks behind, lips whispering, "Lily, it's me." He saw her in every face of every stranger. And as hard as he tried to stay awake at nights, the dreams would always find a way of sealing his eyelids, shifting surreal visions into nightmarish memories, reveries cracking fissures in the lines of his skin, a record of Beethoven's 7th playing again and again, and it was Suzanne's favorite classical piece. A symphony so clear the musicians may have been present in the car that night. A maroon minivan made its way back home to Wilmington, 3 a.m. Morgan was just fine until the songs became quieter, until Beethoven's lullabies lulled all 3 of them to sleep. Sleep! He woke 30 years later from the recurring dream, forgetting for a moment that he was the only survivor, forgetting that the crash killed his Suzanne and his Lily, forgetting that he, the old man, was the only Hawks left. And he whispered, "It's me!" But the dead remained deaf. 3 stories higher, an aged piano's climb began to stutter. The cables hadn't been double-checked that day, and only one Herculean clamp was all that kept the crane from spilling over. The owner, Jackie Durson, spotted the tide not failing, saw the old man sitting like a target underneath, and for some reason, all she could think of was her favorite Beethoven piece. Then like that, the cables holding the instrument ripped, stripping the black man from its plastic slip, and down fell all 573 pounds of never-tubing music. The old man felt the wind above him shift. And a split second later, the street swallowed him. Spectators later noticed a foreign stamp on the sidewalk. Loose change and lotto tickets, the only remains of Morgan Hawks. Some gawked at those interlocked skeletons, but Jackie Durson felt sick, knowing she was mourning more for that instrument than the man it took with it, so she tried something different. She wrote a sort of requiem for the nameless man, bought a keyboard, and started to perform on Montgomery Street. She thought she'd call the song Music in the Air. And maybe that air has carried her melody to a remote Carolina beach somewhere, drifting in between the grains of sand, still searching for the soul of a gray old man. Perhaps the music wishes to make amends, but the dead remain deaf, and Morgan sleeps with his Lily again.